Everybody, we're here at Alchemist Cove Games and Comics. I'm Brent, and we're going to be starting a series of painting videos. Painting things to get the gray tide, the gray pile of shame diminished. Just looking for a simple tabletop standard. First thing we're going to paint is a Space Marine Lieutenant. We're going to start off by going through the build all the way to completion. And when we're done, this is what we're going to have. Simple, nice looking model to sit on table. I don't use anything fancy. I use a pair of the Army Painter clippers and just start slowly removing pieces from the sprue. You don't want to cut too close to your model. You want to kind of, see if I can get that in focus, keep it a little bit away because I'd rather clean it off with my knife later than mar into my miniature. The less you got to fix, the less you got to do. So simply go around carefully. Now, somewhere like the arm joint here, you really don't got to worry too much. You can just cut that flush because it's going to get covered by another part. And you just go around cleaning it off. The high visible spots, like here on the hip pads, sometimes I'll just cut the nub off and I'll clean that off with my knife later. And it simply pops out like that. Now, I personally clean up every piece once I get it off. Now, I'll use a knife. I'm not a big fan of mold removal tools, but use what's comfortable to you. I'll just take my blade and carefully make it flush. And then to remove any flashing, I just simply use the back of my knife like a scraper blade. Anybody who does any woodworking has experience with that. And just go around carefully cleaning up any mold lines, flashing, getting it clean, looking for any little imperfections that may prevent gluing. One of the best tools we have is actually our fingers. And you can even take your fingernail, roll it across, make sure it's smooth, make sure it doesn't catch anything. Now, if you can see here, try to get it focused a little bit. There's a little bit of a flashing line coming down the hip pad. And I'll just simply take the back of my knife and scrape that smooth. You want to make sure you don't hit any of the details like the rivets here on the side. Good clean blade always helps. And there we go, nice and smooth. Now, like, I left this big chunk here because it was hard to get in there with my clippers to get it smooth. And I'll just take my knife carefully, I do this a lot, and just snip it off. And then come back with my blade. And carefully clean it up. Once again, get rid of that mold line, and this one kind of rolls up into the joint a little bit, and I'll just use the tip of the blade, kind of get up there and get it cleaned up. Look around for any other imperfections. You know, really want to make sure you get cleaned up where it's going to glue together. Make sure there's no little flashings. All that can prevent the model from gluing together cleanly. And just take a good look around, looking for any other imperfections, flash lines. And on that piece, we look really good. clean up any debris. Now, like you see here, I notice I got a little bit right there. So just carefully come in on the edge and clean it up. And then we just move on to the next piece, and we'll grab his back piece. Snip. Snip. And snip. Instead, I'd rather leave a little extra on there and cut it off with my knife than dig into my mini. And just carefully come in once again and clean up the excess. A little more time you spend here makes it a whole lot more easy painting. You can see we got a little goober right there from manufacturing. And a little work with our knife, and we can get that taken care of. Really want to be careful not to dig in. And you'll notice I flip my knife back and forth a lot, using the blade and using the back as a scraper. Looking at everything, just keep looking around, looking for the little manufacturing imperfections. Now here there's a little divot we got to be careful of. You see there, don't know how well you can see it, but that is a little marker to help you line up a piece for gluing. Want to make sure we don't remove that, but we want to get the excess off of there. So those, you just got to be a little more careful. Get it cleaned up.
What? Did you shuffle? Yeah.
And that should be good. Look around, look for any imperfections. I tend to run my knife around my glue marks where I'm going to be gluing. Just making sure it's clean. Now when we paint this mini, we're going to be doing very simple tabletop paint job, but hopefully really clean. Hitting some highlights, some shadows, and making the details pop. People paint different ways and build different ways. This is just the way I do it. And there we got those two together. Now usually what I'll do at this point is I will glue these together so I can set them aside and let them dry. I use Zap. It's what I like. It's very thin and it dries relatively quickly. Try to get this in the camera without getting in the way of you guys seeing. Not much came out there, but oh, thank God it ran to the inside. And then we will fit these two pieces together and give them a good squeeze. Hold them for a couple seconds. Let that all dry together real nice. And we will set that aside. So there we have our first part glued together. And we will set that aside and continue going. So why don't we give our guy some legs? Bottom of the feet, I'm not worried about being too close. Just get it clean. Back here. Some of the thinner ones are a little tough, not to cut too close. Just be careful. Now we got his legs off. Let's get those cleaned up and keep moving on. Still clean up the bottom of the boots. Continue using our knife as a scraper. And if you're more comfortable using a mold line removal tool for this, that is up to you. I have used an X-Acto like this for a long time. And with the Space Marines, you always end up with a flash line, usually going down the back of the boot. So just go in carefully, trying to keep that round, not making it flat, and get rid of that little bit of flashing. And then there's usually a little piece, yep, there it is, on the lips. A little bit of prep time does make it easier when you paint, especially if you do any dry brushing, which those who have watched me paint in the past know I do a lot of. And then up the back, continue removing that flashing, getting rid of the mold lines. Sometimes you got to turn things around just to get different angles, make sure you got it all. And got a little piece right here from the sprue, a little nub, putting his knee pad on. And just get cleaned up. And just take your time. It's easy to go slow and do it right. And there's one foot cleaned up. Grab the other one, same process. And usually down the front, you'll get a flash line. Just be careful not to gouge in. Take your time, it will clean up.
Here you go, I'm gonna poke around. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And then there's usually I don't know if you guys can see it. There's usually a piece of flashing on the front of the boot. It's really hard to get. If you can't get it, it's really not that big of a deal. Sometimes I'll even grab with my fingernail. Just clean up the best you can. Little scratches, primer will fill if you use a good primer. I use Chaos Black, or I use, if I'm going to break out the airbrush because I'm priming a lot, I'll use black primer from Monument Hobbies from the Pro Acryl line. But my go-to is still a good old can of Chaos Black. It is worth it. Now we got a little flashing here between. I'll carefully take my blade and run them through and try to get that out. Blow it off a little bit. Have my at-home setup. I have a little mini air compressor. Today I am my air compressor. Alright, looking good. Cleaned up. Double check this one. One of the other things I forgot to say in the beginning is working with models. I have learned to make sure your hands are clean and dry. I want to try to keep as many of your skin oils off the plastic as you can. I typically clean my models with a little dish soap and water and let them air dry before I prime them. Make sure they're clean, give the primer the best chance to adhere. And sometimes you gotta do a little fitting, see how this guy's gonna sit. And I'll pop right up in there and sit real good. So let's get his legs glued on. So this, grab our glue again. And usually this stuff, that will do you. We'll grab our leg and just snap him up in. Hold him there for a couple seconds, let that glue grab. And there you go. One leg on. Oop. Not much glue there. Danger of using a thin. And now at this point, I'll let that dry for a little bit before I continue. Never fails. I get glue on my fingers. Alright, so now our guy, what's next? Let's grab the front of his belt. You know what? Or let's see what we got here. Let's finish up his legs here with the front of his shoulder, his leg pads. Cut it. Careful with these little guys. Those ones I'd rather leave a little nub on. And clean it off with my knife once again.
That's the problem, is this deck is dirty, so I can't empty my.
And sometimes you got to come in at different angles, figure out what works for you and what's comfortable. The more comfortable you are doing this, the easier it'll be. Let's grab his belt while we're at it. Come in. Just try to cut it clean. And not dig in. Alright, so now we're going to start cleaning these guys up. We'll get better at this the more we do it. A little awkward working on camera. Not something I have done. But try to get it work smooth and clean. For any flashing, any mold lines that we need to remove, and that looks pretty good. So to the other one, we left that little nub there. Just going to come on my blade real simply, work that off without trying to dig in. Use the back of my blade like a scraper once again and clean it off. Look for mold lines and get the other little nub off from the sprue. Now, a lot of repetitiveness. Just take your time. Once we get into painting, it'll go a lot more exciting to watch. And nice and clean. Get its belt. And the sides here, you got to be careful on these thin parts. Just take your time. Clean it up. Knock that burr off. And then the tops here on the belts can be a little tricky because there's some detail in the belt buckle. Just go in. Carefully and get it clean. Charge him double.
You just keep cutting over there, don't touch your fingers.
Alright, we got that nice and cleaned up. And back to the glue. You know, use what glue you're comfortable with. Some guys use the Loctite blue. The Citadel plastic glue is good. I like the Army Painter glue. I'm just really starting to go and try some new stuff. I used that before in my past with building like model cars and stuff. I always liked it. dot. And this little dimple. Line them up.
Right there, big softy. See you.
All right, take it easy, Chris.
I'll touch base with you during the week.
All right, brother. And get it glued on. Hold it for a couple seconds. And we are attached. I like a thin glue because it dries a little faster. But to each their own. And use what you're comfortable with. As we do these, I'll do different glues. I'm just using what I use typically right now. And that's glued on there nice and good. I tend to use very little glue, little as possible, or try. If you use a good glue, it stays nice and solid. And you don't got to worry about glue being all over your model. Sometimes it happens. You see back here in the back, I did. I'll go in and I'll clean that up when I'm all done. And we're starting to look like a space marine. And we'll have some choices here for some different things. What we want. Comes with options. Even comes with the plastic for the, piece of fabric for the front of the belt. I tend to like the leather, but I like painting leather. Let's take a look here. Let's get our guy some arms and figure out what we want to do. I'm always a fan for swords, because who doesn't like swords? Let's grab this power sword. You ain't got to worry there. It's going to get covered by the shoulder pauldron. Just usually careful here, the ones on the wrist. And the little one here on the edge of the sword. Dunk. And he comes right off. So now, that gives us one arm. And, you know what? Just for fun, let's grab the plasma pistol. Because then we can paint some plasma coils later on. Show you guys how I do that. So careful just cutting off. Nice and clean. There we go. Now we're going to go back and clean up. Front of the plasma pistol, just be careful not to dig in too hard. Top of plasma here, you got that little nub. Just be careful, take your time, a little at a time, work it down. Looking for mold lines, looking for flashing. And you really want to make sure you get this back here good and clean. Doesn't have to be pretty. You definitely want that mark on. Because it'll keep your shoulder pauldron from sitting nice. And check the inside where you're going to glue, because any little nub there can keep it from sitting right. And a little bit of a flashing line running down here and in the groove. I'll just run the tip of my knife through, get that cleaned up. Now, every model's different, just gotta look around and find them. Like right here, the back of the elbow, we got a flash line. Just be careful. A little light scraping. And it comes right off. Now play around, figure out what works for you, what you're comfortable doing. The biggest thing working on these things is being comfortable. Typically when I'm working, I got some rock and roll on, audiobook, something for some background. Alright, here we got our plasma pistol. Let's get our power sword ready. You know, got that little nub right there. The handle here, sometimes it can be a little difficult. Just be careful, make yourself steady. Come in, clean that up. If you do dig in a little bit, it's not the end of the world. Let's just be careful and try not to. Getting up on the part that's going to be hidden by the pauldron. Don't have to be so careful. Just get it clean. Got that flashing running down the back of the arm. Do enough of these, you learn where they are. You know, definitely looking forward to hearing what you guys want to see, have ideas on what we should paint, different things to paint. Somebody's going to say white armor, and please no. Anybody who knows me in painting, I will avoid white. But we might do one down the line and see what happens. I'm all for learning, building new skills. I'm trying to keep it here on camera. This is new to me. Always end up with a little line on the handguard of the sword. Just be careful and it'll come right off. Alright, we'll look around, see if we missed anything.
So you Nuke, you can choose to bring everything back or just one thing?
Take breaks as you need. A lot of hand work. Alrighty. Let's see how we want our arms to sit.
but then if you get something better that you would play to try to draw or that you would try to draw or
You kind of get the position how you want.
do another thing, you won't play that card.
Putting glue on, figure out kind of how you want it.
Yeah.
You won't be able to play the 16. That's fine. The Chromacron definitely helped with that when one card, when the big Shisu literally wiped your whole board because everything was a 2. But if you now you gotta choose, you wipe my, I'm at 16, you're at 10, you got 8 down, you wipe my board, you lose everything.
And carefully,
I bounce everything down.
a little dab of glue.
And then if you don't got enough ink to play
It's a little
everything
much.
again,
That's true.
it's good for me. I can just build back. Everything is so cheap. I could build back up slowly and make you discard everything you just put back in your hand.
But it'll be okay.
Yeah, that Chromacron is.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's really strong.
And get a position. Hold it still. Let that glue dry.
It was so worried about Bucky.
And sometimes that happens.
And then they made this. That and the finish on there is really
Yeah,
bad.
they're good.
And we're going to let that arm good and dry.
And a good card, but it's hard to find.
Glue. And boom. There we go. Got his arm on. And let him take a rest and let that glue set. Alright, let's get some shoulder pauldrons on this guy. Cut it off there at the bottom. Just falls off. Try to get this one a little more in focus. And snip. Some guys paint these off. I tend to paint them on, especially for this and how we're going to do this. We're just going to do a simple tabletop, easy, beginner paint job on this guy.
but doesn't that let you search for each X out? Don't forget to search for like the basic one. Oh yeah, I guess most people are. I prefer to
Now we got our shoulder pauldrons cleaned up. See how they sit before we drop any glue.
like I know somebody who doesn't run any basic ones at all. So literally, he'll want to. We just fucking play wood.
That's a good thing also, like,
But they can't get rid of it either.
Well, they can't play underneath it.
yeah, but like, you could have questioned, like, you could have anticipated how down you came and questioned it to get the two, and then I just bounce my whole thing back. Now you leave it open for it to get attacked. Even my 5-color Urgot, you're like, you know what, he might bounce shit, so let me just quest, so at least I get the more bacon out than I don't, and then now it's open for an attack.
Alrighty, so there we go.
That we have left, yes.
A little dab of glue. And get the shoulder pauldron on. Nice and glued tight. Be careful. I do recommend actually using a thicker glue for beginners. It is easier. And get that stuck on. Alright. Starting to look like something. So now I believe we need take a look at our guy.
You got 10 stamps, you get one free pack from standard, whether it be a play booster, set booster, draft booster.
Nice.
Of your choice.
So he has a little shoulder shield that can go on. I'm usually not a fan of those. I just don't like them. So we're not going to add that, but we are going to add his little pistol case, a little holster here. And cut that off nice and clean. And then we're going to use this helmet because I like painting helmets. And cut his head off. Alrighty. And then while we're here, we just might as well pop off his little jetpack. Now, the little things they put on the little jetpacks, I try to cut off a little chunky because I'd rather remove it with my knife again. I find it easier to get smooth. Sometimes you gotta take it here in little chunks. Take your time. And there you go. Alright, so now go back in with our knife. And clean out.
Would you like a receipt?
No, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, probably good about the don't produce it.
We're switching one.
And just make sure once again, carefully clean up any of the spur marks. Look for flashing. This one's actually been pretty good. Sometimes they're a lot worse. This one's actually really clean. Alright, so we got that all cleaned up. You know, it's not going to be seen. Want to make sure you get the bottom of the head or helmet cleaned off so it sits nice and glues properly. Don't got to worry about it being too pretty. Just get it clean. There we go. Hopefully you guys can see running right around the helmet, pretty much across the ears. There's a nice little flashing line. That's kind of typical where they are. Just once again, go with the back of your knife, or your mold line removal tool, and clean that off.
My brother's having a pretty rough day, so I'm here to take something off for him to make him feel better.
Yeah, so what?
Probably gonna end up being some 1 Piece for him.
I got that all cleaned up.
How you doing, Ralphie?
At the end of my turn, I have to be down to 3.
Alright. This piece backpack in here at the bottom between the exhaust ports can be a little bit of a pain in the butt. Just carefully go in.
Yeah, not only because of the discharge, but just because it forces you to play things between not going to play.
Tip of the knife.
I understand next step is going to be more item removal.
Yeah.
I feel like
What we got right now is what? Benja, item removal. We got some,
some spells.
yeah, we got that new green spell that removes items. There's really not a lot of item removal. You know, this bench is really like the main piece when it comes to item removal.
Usually the top of the shoulder pauldrons on the backpack, not pauldrons, a little jetpack ports. Have on them, just carefully scrape them off. Alright, so just keep carefully. I know everybody says don't cut towards yourself. I've cut myself, done it a lot. Just be careful. Just get it good and cleaned up.
Alright, I gave Ralphie the run.
Alright. But nice and cleaned up. Take a look for any flashing. A little bit here. And a little halo with spikes. Just be careful. You back your blade. And they come right off. They come off pretty easy. Just get them smooth. And you're good. Alright. And said,
Hold on the shop and we'll go slow, right?
figure out. Dry fitting parts always works best. Figure out how it's going to sit.
Yes.
Always forget to, every time I play location, I always forget to pass the door.
Yeah. And then.
There we go. That's how we sit. Alright. And after this, I'll just put a little line of glue. It's a little flat spot right here. You guys can see that, and just carefully little bead of glue. Take time, get it lined back up. Alright, we got our Space Marine all glued together, stuck to our paint handle. Now we just got to do some priming, and then we're ready to move on with painting. We got our base done. Everything's cleaned up, good to go. Going with the helmet, power sword, plasma pistol. We're going to be doing him in the traditional Space Marine blue, doing Ultramarines. We'll do some mid-level highlighting, nothing too difficult. Something you guys can definitely do to get your gray hordes painted and on the table, and something easy for new painters to follow along with. As we go on in further videos, we'll get into more complicated painting techniques like glazing, but for now we're going to keep it simple. From all of us here at Alchemist Cove, thank you for watching, and we'll guys see you next time when we continue working on our Space Marine Lieutenant. Thank you.